Welcome to the 2025 Ancient Theatre Festival, organized by the Department of Classics and Ancient History here at Warwick. My name is Emmanuela Bakola, and I am an associate professor in ancient Greek language and literature, and I teach mainly Greek theatre and Greek mythology. I am the academic lead of the production of the annual drama festival now for nearly 10 years. And we're delighted to be in the position once again to host so many schools from so many parts of the country to enjoy together a project that we're so proud of, especially as it has resulted from the hard work of our students and their imaginative collaboration with their lecturers over many months. So thank you for coming. And we hope that you will find the day entertaining, intellectually stimulating, and inspiring. The Ancient Theatre Festival for schools has become one of the most important events of the departmental calendar. And as you can probably see, again, from your surroundings in this beautiful space, it continues to be ambitious both materially and intellectually. The Department of Classics and Ancient History provides the students with ample opportunities to explore every aspect of the ancient world, from its material culture, its history, its political institutions, to its society, its arts. All these aspects of the classical world are hugely important for understanding an event so multidimensional and so multifaceted as the theatre of the Greek world was. If you want to find out more about the process of putting this production together and the opportunities that it has offered the students to develop creative skills, please have a look at the production program that they lovingly put together and also at our dedicated website. Now, Warwick Classics is committed to bringing the work of its staff and students to the community, including to schools. As you will see from the program, and also from this slide, we are in the process of creating new educational resources for the study of Greek theatre in a new website that will be made available for free very soon for whoever wants an inspiring and creative approach to this subject at A level or even beyond. Many of these, including bite-sized videos, are being put together by our brilliant students and, of course, staff, with funding from Warwick earmarked for giving opportunities to whoever wants to make a difference in the way the Greek theatre is communicated. It is absolutely necessary, please, and this is the only thing that I ask from you today, to spend a few minutes after the end of the day, so after you watch the production, to fill in the questionnaire that came with your program. Every year, this is incredibly important evidence for our work to continue with uninterrupted funding. Over the years, the Drama Festival has brought incredible enrichment and employment opportunities to our students, including, for example, very recently a placement as producer at the BBC, research assistance placements, and fully funded scholarships for postgraduate study. If you are interested in considering Warwick as a place for study, there are details for our next open days in the back cover. And now, before I pass over to my colleague, Paul Grigsby, who will introduce you to the historical context of Agamemnon and the Oresteia, let me say a few words about theatre in the Greek world to give you some context. In order to understand the Greek theatre in depth, you need to keep in mind that Greek culture was a performance culture. This is largely because of the very low levels of literacy, of course, because of the absence of the written word for most people, apart from the elite. So the way Greeks, including Greeks of the 5th century, which is the peak of Greek theatre, enjoyed their arts, including their theater, in festivals, which happened all year round, local and pan-Hellenic festivals. And over there, they enjoyed music and dance performances, instrumental performances, rhapsodic recitations, for example, recitations of epic, Homer, other poetry, all in a competitive context, as Greeks loved to do. So enjoying arts meant enjoying performance, but other experiences that we mostly associate today with the book and the written word were also experienced in performance, including philosophy and science. Again, because of the general absence of the availability of the written word for most people, traveling intellectuals would communicate their ideas and their theories to large sections of the public. Politics was exercised in a very performance-like way. I mean, you can relate to this even today, especially with the performance of rhetoric and persuasion. Trials as well, performative elements embedded in the society, including also the role of religion. We associate religion today with something very esoteric, something that the individuals do by themselves. But Greek religion in the ancient world is founded on ritual and cult, and these are performative acts. So, for example, grand processions where Athenians and Greeks from all over the world, the known Greek world, then would participate, which would include also a wonderful spectacle. So the theater, and this is what I want you to imagine always, is that the theater of ancient Athens is part and product of this all-encompassing song and performance culture. As an experience, thus, it is very different from today's experience of going to the theater. Today, we are in a closed space like this. We're using artificial lighting and also not connected to any kind of religious festival. In the ancient world, the Greeks and other visitors to the festivals would gather in not buildings as such, but the landscape architecture, theaters that were in the open air, exposed to the elements in mass numbers, ranging from about 6,000 to 15,000 together. I know that mostly when you're shown theaters in your books, you're probably shown the theater of Dionysus in Athens. This is the earliest photo I can find for the theater of Dionysus in Athens, which again shows you, because Athens is not really densely built at that time in the early 20th century. Again, you can see how the theater is part of the landscape and has expansive vistas. Now the contexts. So people would gather in these, open spaces. But in what contexts? These would have been the festivals. The Greek theater is mostly connected with the Great Dionysia, so the largest festival for Greek theater, taking place in spring, which would allow sailing from abroad, so the festival would welcome an international audience. So it would be the perfect place for Athenians to parade their wares, including their ideologies. They were organized on a massive scale, and they lasted about 6 days, these Great Dionysia. They would include religious processions, such as the Pompeii, really huge spectacle there, sacrifices of hundreds of animals, so the biggest barbecue the city would see. And of course, there was huge investment of time and money. Over 1,200 performers would be engaged in these festivals, and the audiences would experience competitions between large choruses, the dithyramb, tragedies, satyr dramas, and comedies. Now, the Lenaya happened in winter, another very large festival, not as large as the Great Dionysia, also because it happened at a time that did not allow sailing, so not many international audiences would come. Similar, a bit smaller in scale, and their comedy mostly dominated. But also, sometimes there is the misunderstanding that Greek plays were produced only once at the theater of Dionysus in Athens. This is very, very far from the truth. First of all, the townships of Attica, many townships of Attica, we know at least 4, with hard evidence in the 5th century, but certainly a lot more, were running their own local Dionysia. And these are the occasions where the plays would, in a way, tour, okay, all around Attica. And as you can imagine, these local Dionysia were very important also for the afterlife of the plays. But also, abroad, Greek theater was exported and performed abroad. From the earliest 5th century, so the earliest surviving play of our corpus, the Persians, we have evidence that it was performed in Syracuse. The theater would have been the theater of Syracuse, maybe not built in stone already, although the theater of Syracuse was one of the theaters that was most early built in stone. And also other theaters that I can show you, for example, the theater of Thorikos in southeast Attica. I want you to notice the landscape all around, and I want you to try to think about the landscape and elements like mountains and the sea and the sky and the elements and heavenly bodies that are visible in the Greek sky, even during the day in some seasons. I want you to think about this as part of the experience of theater. The theater of Icarion in northeast Attica, and for those of you who came to see last year, who came to see the Persians last year, I gave this kind of bonus hypothesis, okay, that we know that the theater of Eleusis would have been active in the 5th century. So if the Persians were produced at the theater of Eleusis, except from the theater of Dionysus, then the orientation of the theater would have made the Straits of Salamis, where the naval battle took place, the very background of the play. So I think this is quite mind-blowing, although please don't take it as a fact, but it is quite a strong hypothesis. Now, the development of theater in Athens. Athens, already by the 6th century BC, fashioned itself as the cultural capital of Greece. So if you wanted to be somebody in arts in the 6th or 5th century, you had to make it to Athens. It started, conventionally, the start is dated to around 534 BC. And this is a period that is connected to tyranny. But tyrannical, the tyranny at Athens at the time were mainly, populist regimes. So Greek theater festivals are extremely popular. So it actually does make sense why tyrannical, why the tyrants would have invested in theater festivals. But Athenian theater is mainly connected with democracy because, the earliest theater that we have is from 472 when Athens is already a democratic state. The theater then developed amid massive historical, social, and political developments, which led to the institution of democracy in Athens around 508 and its radicalization around 460. Theater also developed in the aftermath of the Persian Wars, something which is extremely important, again, if you think about plays like the Persians, but also the Oresteia, with the development of Athens into an empire. So ideas around imperialist expansionism are quite prominent, especially in Aeschylus. And also with imperialist expansionism and the external war, booming prosperity comes. And Aeschylean theater in particular thinks very much about the role of prosperity and wealth and the evils that this brings into society and individuals. So Greek theater, of course, also inherits and engages with a rich philosophical tradition of the so-called pre-Socratic philosophers. So, the traveling lectures that I told you about earlier, from cosmology to political philosophy, really exciting theories about the cosmos infiltrate and inspire these playwrights, and they ooze out of their plays, especially, again, and I will insist on Aeschylus just because it is Aeschylus that you have come to see. From cosmology, but of course political philosophy, which is something that is better known and better researched in scholarship. Also, the development of the theater was contemporaneous with the intellectual movement of the sophists. So the movement of the sophists, an ambitious, not really a movement, but an ambitious influx of intellectuals from all over the Greek world who were interested in intensely exploring religious, philosophical, political, and social ideas. And all of these, again, inspire and find their way into Greek theater. So the context is really important. So some facts, the earliest surviving tragedy, I've said it many times. So the Aeschylus' Persians, 472, although it would have been quite a mature play, not an early play. The latest surviving plays we have are Euripides' Iphigenia and Aulis and the Bacchae, which would have been produced posthumously, and also Euripides' Rhesus, which is only attributed to Euripides, but it was probably penned by somebody in his following, in his school. Now, we know 4 playwrights. Okay? From your textbooks, you read about 4 playwrights: Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and the comic poet Aristophanes. But we know for a fact that there were over 100 playwrights active in the 5th century. And in total, together, they would have produced over 1,200 plays from the beginning to the end of the 5th century. Unfortunately, we have only 43, which are complete, as in, as close as possible to what the playwrights would have written. But I want you to think for a moment about, the tiny percentage of plays that we have and what else was possible. Sometimes we identify what we have with what, Greek tragedy or Greek comedy or Greek satyr drama, would have looked like. But we've lost so much that, it's only regrettable. There are some titles out there that it's really unfortunate that, these plays were not selected to survive. So let me go on to the buildings now. So usually you're shown, the Theater of Dionysus in Athens, and I've seen in some of your textbooks that this is what, you're shown. This is though how the theater would have looked in, the ruins of the theater dating from the 2nd century AD. But theaters, as I said before, they were not buildings, they were mostly landscape, architecture, and the architecture of the theaters was non-monumental until the 4th century. So, to take the Theater of Dionysus in Athens, you have to imagine that the slope of the rock of the Acropolis was used, and every year contractors would be brought to build the temporary auditorium and also the temporary skene building, okay, the theater building. Now, it is important, and I will say it again, and actually it is important for today's production, that you realize that the skene, the theater building, wasn't a wooden hut, wasn't a tiny building just in the background for actors to change their costume. I think this is quite a misrepresentation. It was a huge building, a huge space, 20 meters long, and would have been also the only space in the entire theater, sanctuary, which would have not been flooded by natural light. It was this only space with which darkness could be associated. Now, this is quite important because Greek tragedy especially really likes the idea of darkness. So please don't think of this wooden hut as, please don't think of the skene building as a wooden hut. Please think of it as a space of darkness that has an enormous potential in dramaturgical terms. So, if you sat in the auditorium, this is what you would have seen. The skene building, yes, as long as this image, with the door, hugely important. The door is a transition from the outside to the inside, from the light to the darkness. And similarly, so along these lines, your ekiklema trolley, the theatrical trolley, would have been the device that brings darkness outside into the light. Really, really important, really sophisticated ideas surrounding these spaces, which I think should be, implemented in our, textbooks, and I think students should really understand these spaces do not have only practical purposes. They have really, really important dramaturgical significance. So in the 5th century, performances of tragedy, you would be expected to see about 2 to 3 actors, around 12 to 15 strong chorus, okay, a hugely important part of the performance. The chorus, unlike our chorus today, I'm sorry, our students were not very keen on singing, but choruses sang and danced, or at the very least they chanted. Also characters sang, and there was permanently musical accompaniment by the aulos player. The skene would have had minimal scenery because the rich spaces of Greek theater, especially that space of darkness that I told you about, have to be constructed in the world of the mind. So I'm giving you a clue already for this production to think about the audience imagination in relation to the dark space inside the skene and what the symbolism of this might be.